I guess first questions first, how's your Otakon so far?
It's great. It's great to be back. It's been a few years,
Mm-hmm.
but I did my Q&A today, and it felt just like yesterday. All old friends, seeing a sea of faces. It's great. This con has a really great vibe, and it's a really wonderful city. I love Baltimore. I love being near the bay. It's really cool. So I enjoy it.
Awesome. Well, how does this so far compare to past convention experiences?
It's huge. It's very big. I do a lot of conventions, but most of them are modest sized. I mean, there are tons of conventions, and most of them have to be modest sized, But Otakon is definitely the biggest I do. That's dedicated strictly to anime, and the cadre of Japanese guests is outstanding. So that's really cool. I love getting to meet some of the talent from the source. That's always great, and I don't think anywhere do I get to meet as many of them as here, which is awesome.
Awesome. Well, I guess to sort of go back to the beginning for you, what was your introduction to voice acting as a career?
My introduction to voice acting as a career was the good folks at Funimation. I happen to know a fellow named Chris Bevins, who's a dear friend of mine, and he said, "Hey, I'm working on this show called Samurai 7. I need some new voices on it, and I like your voice. I know you were an actor at one point. Would you like to try and do it again?" And I'd never done voice acting before, so I actually declined. I said thank you, but no thank you, because I didn't think I was qualified. But he sort of insisted, well, he did in fact insist, and wore me down until I finally came in and auditioned, and he was really pleased with it, and I learned voice acting through the sort of Bevins boot camp method. So about 8 months on that show, I feel, taught me things I will continue using for the rest of my life, both just personally and in my career. So that was my start. That was my start. It was great to do it in anime because I've been a big anime geek since I was a kid.
Oh yeah. So was doing this sort of like one of like a dream come true sort of situation?
Well, it
or?
wasn't so much a dream come true because I never conceived of myself doing something like this. But
Right.
once I was doing it, I'm like, oh my god, I'm in anime. Oh my god, I get to do this. Oh my god. Then I get to meet all the voices for, I started going to cons and meeting people like Steve Bloom, who's been a personal hero for ages, and turns out a really nice guy. And Tony Oliver, who was Rick Hunter, and all these people that I've since become very close friends with. It sounds like I'm just name dropping, but they really are remarkable people, and getting to meet them was a huge honor, and getting to call myself their colleague, is just been it just tickles me pink every time I think about it.
Well, awesome. And you do video game voice acting as well. Can you just sort of explain the difference of what it's like to dub an anime versus dubbing, a video game, and if there's any differences between doing something like Borderlands, which is American made, versus dubbing something that's an import game?
So the game process, the dubbing recording for dubs is what we call, you're basically laying down track to stuff that's already there, to animation that's already there. So it's very challenging because you often have, as an actor, you're used to a lot more freedom in terms of timing and where you want to emphasize a word here, there, depending on the read. But you may not have the time for that if it doesn't fit the animation or the mouth movements. We call them flaps in the industry.
Yeah.
So flaps really force you to kind of fine hone your approach. You're like, okay, I have to process this line and the delivery and the scene and everything that you normally would. You have to process it with all the usual equipment of your actor's instrument, but then you have to also take into account this whole other dimension that's normally not part of the equation, which is timing, in the sense of like very specific animatic timing. And so that it becomes really interesting. Once you fall into that, though, and then you're shunted over into something like video games, which are all prelay, which is, generally speaking, with prelay, which is most stuff that's made here in the States and then released, or video games, are the animatic. You might have animatics to work with, but they're not. The mouth movements are not animated yet. You often don't even have that. You often just have lines. Usually huge amounts of lines, all of them disparate too, because rather than it being a normal script where you have this scene between people, you just have banks of just your lines, and they're they're categorized by where they fall in the context of the game. So obviously, because these games are open worlds and kind of sort of sandboxes, if you will, you have a few scenes that are more traditional in the sense, oh, this is a piece of dialogue between you and this character or whatever. But more often than not, it's just a bank of lines where, oh, I have about 18 lines here and they're all battle lines that might come up, so we need to record them as an option. And so you have to kind of isolate each one, and it's weird. And because you don't have pre-existing animation to work with, sometimes it's a little too freeing. You're like, I'm sort of recording in a vacuum, so to speak. So they both have their challenges, but those are the primary differences. One of them, you're sort of guided by the animation to such a degree that you just kind of get swept up. I find myself, anyway, getting kind of swept up into what I'm seeing, and just sort of letting that carry, the emotion and whatever that I need to marshal into it for the performance. But with prelay stuff, you're kind of on your own, and you really have to have a dialogue with your director. Oftentimes, though, if it's a scene, you will get to do it with other actors in the booth, more like a classic radio play or even a stage play. So that can be rewarding too. But if you're by yourself, it can be really strange, but it's fun. It's just it's all different. They all fall kind of somewhere in the continuum of acting skills. But I feel it's voice acting in general is a very strange thing. I feel that it's. You have so much less available to you in terms of how you can get the performance across, because when you're doing something on stage or film or whatever, you have so many other things that help you create that imaginative reality of the experience for you, so you can convey it to the audience. So you have costumes, you have sets, you have other actors, you maybe the many-headed hydra that is a live paying audience, which can just electrify you. But when it comes to voice acting, you have none of that. You have only your vocal cords, and that the rest of you has to be relatively still, because the sleeve moving might pick up on mic, so you're very limited. And it's kind of like it's like being asked to build a house using only a hammer. That's all you one tool. So it's very challenging, very, very challenging.
And you've done almost as much on the other side of the mic, if you have behind it. So at what point were you like, okay, I'm going to try my hand at directing or script adaptation?
I never really said, I want to do that. I sort of found myself being asked if I'd be interested. And the thing about this business is it's very niche. Acting is already a weird industry that's kind of cutthroat and very competitive and hard to get into. But then beyond that, you have very specific things like anime dubbing or video gaming, and then adaptations and stuff like that. So it's like in this business, once you get a foothold, the more you do, the more you get to do. So I had been working as a voice actor, and then I just happened, and someone said, hey, do you mind just directing this one day for me? Because I got to, as a director, I was like, oh, sure, you should take it. So I sub-directed for a little while, and then they gave me my own show, and then I happened to be directing someone who was also writing on the show, who said, hey, I need some writers. Do you want to join me? And suddenly I just suddenly realized I was wearing all these hats, and it just sort of happened, and I never really said, I'm going to do this. I'm never going to do this. It just suddenly, I'm going to do that. Apparently, okay, all right. Let's do it. That's awesome. Generally how it works in this business, actually. Right. So.
And you're doing a lot of stuff that's coming to the States this year or later this year. Right. Is there anything else later this year or next year that you are able to talk about?
I'm not. The big thing now, of course, is Free Eternal Summer, which is coming on right now and getting really good feedback. It's a huge show and a great honor to be part of that. I got to work on that as both lead adaptive writer and as Ray, the glasses wearing, butterfly boy who I love. That's really big. Of course, that's still coming out. That's anything else I can talk. God, I never know. I always have so many irons in the fire. I never quite know which one's ready for me. Like here, so I'll stick to that one.
Okay.
I'll stick to that one. But there's some exciting stuff coming about that I cannot wait to talk about.
Excellent. Well, we'll look forward to it.
Thank you.
Thank you.